It says we are live. So, hello everybody. Welcome to the latest Patreon Q&A. So, if you are joining us, let us know that you're here. You can either um, kind of comment in the chat section over there in the private YouTube chat, or you can comment on the Facebook page. Looks like we have 4 people on. So let me move this over a little bit. And let's see what we have. So, I asked last week kind of what you guys want to talk about. And one of the suggestions was to kind of go over um, the last 2 videos which posted. And obviously, the last 2 videos were on the breeding sequence, calling setup. So go ahead and type your questions in. Last night during Wapiti Wednesday, during Wapiti Wednesday Q&A, one of the questions I had was about, pulling satellite bulls away, from the herd if you get on a herd. So I talked about, kind of adjusting the breeding sequence, based on what you're trying to call to, and said that I would kind of go into that a little more depth tonight too. So, what questions do you guys have on the breeding sequence and those last 2 instructional videos? So, all right, we got some comments. Kelly Ford, how you doing, buddy? Chris Siemens, hope all is well. Nice goody hoodie. So, okay, so we got a few people that are commenting on the Patreon page. So, I'm not seeing any chats come through YouTube yet. So I'll just kind of start talking about this. So last night, was talking about, what to do if you get into a herd and how you can focus and call those satellite bulls away from the herd. So, you kind of need to understand that, with those satellite bulls. So, they're basically they're hanging around the outside of the herd. They are, hoping to. Mike Strong got your test chat there, so it's coming through, Mike. But so they're hanging around, and they're basically opportunity bulls or opportunistic bulls. And what that means is they're hanging on the outside of the herd, hoping to pick off a cow. If one wanders too far away, or if there is a cow in estrus and the herd bull, vacates to maybe run off another satellite bull, they can slip in and breed that. So, with that in mind, that's kind of what you have to do with your mindset or your calling approach to where you adjust that breeding sequence. And so, what you'll do is you'll focus more on those cow sounds that we talked about in last night. So Mike, last night you mentioned that when working on a satellite bull, you focus on cow sounds and small bull sounds. Can you elaborate and give an example of small bull sounds? Yeah, that's just what I was getting into, Mike. So definitely this is going to make a lot more sense if you guys have watched, chapter 5, part 1 and part 2 of the instructional series. But so, yeah, with the cow sounds, so, when I talked about the breeding sequence, I talked about mixing in some huffs, grunts, and whines and some raking, with some bulls, and how you can kind of, on those huffs, grunts, and whines, you can add a little more emotion into the whines. Well, this one, when you're focusing on satellite bulls, you want to hold off on that emotion. And like I said, on your cow sounds, you're actually going to do a lot more cow sounds than what we talked about, in the video. It and then when you do, you can still do the raking and all that. Just stay on the smaller end with the raking. But when you get into your bull sounds, so what you're going to want to do to kind of, because the bull portion of this, you want to emulate or you want to act like a smaller bull that basically has found a cow that wandered away from the herd. He's kind of pestering her, and some of the cow sounds that I'll throw in is kind of an aggravated, get that volume and that nasaliness. And then on the bull portion of it, you're going to stay real light with your growl. You're grr, grr, not have a ton of growl. Your huffs are a lot less. And then when you actually do get to the whine portion, you're going to have this little, it's definitely going to be a whine. It's going to be on the smaller end, not going to have a lot of volume. Because remember, basically what he's doing is, he's basically sneaking in on this cow. And he doesn't want the herd bull to really know that he's over there and that he's around this cow. But you want to, produce just a little bit of that bull, that curiosity. Because what's going to happen, those other satellite bulls, they're going to recognize what's going on, and they're going to think that, a cow wandered off, and here's this smaller bull that did get with this cow, or has this cow and not letting her get back. And these other satellite bulls are all of a sudden going to think, hey, here's my chance to, go run him off and feel like a herd bull and claim that cow. And what's funny is, it's crazy because I did this in Montana, and the crazy thing about Montana, there was one herd in particular that was really focusing on and working quite a bit. The herd bull was about a 380. And what's funny is he had a couple of satellites that were 350, maybe pushing 360. I mean, good, solid bulls that were his satellites. So they were mature, but they weren't large enough to, take the cows from him. But what's crazy is if that 350 and that 360 satellite, if they just went up over the top and rolled down in the next drainage, there was only a 320 over there that was running cows. So that 350 and that 360 could have been a herd bull. So, but they chose to be around, that larger bull. So let's see if we've got any other comments coming in. So does that kind of make sense on how to adjust? And you're gonna, you're gonna learn that you're going to adjust, your breeding sequence and your calling based on really what you're wanting to accomplish, really what your goal is. Are you wanting, and also what that bull is given back to you. So, like I talked in the video, pay attention to the type of responses that you're getting, and then tailor, what you're doing. So, now other times that, to focus on that satellite bull, there are some times too where I won't even add any bull sounds in. I'll focus on the cow sounds, but I'm always going to do a test. Okay. And here's a prime example. So, about 4 or 5 years ago, Bryce and I, one of my hunting partners, it was an evening hunt, and we were actually on our way back to camp. The area we had worked on that night was not productive. And so we were heading back to camp, and we had some bugle spots that we would hit on the way back to locate. And there's this one ridge that we used to hit in an old burn that they then went in and clear cut. And I said, well, hey, there's been a couple of bulls hanging out in there. There's a herd bull, satellite bull with some cows. Let's just stop by there and see if we can locate anything for the morning. And so we stopped there, and I let off just a nice relaxed location bugle, and I just got this, ooh, this little response back. And what's funny is, Bryce didn't even grab his bow. His bow was in the truck. We were only 30 yards from the truck. So he runs back to his truck. I move forward, and I let off a series of cow calls, and all of a sudden, "Wah!" I got this excited response. I said, okay. Moved up again, let go with a location bugle, and the only response was, ooh, back to that timidness. Moved up another 15, 20 yards, hit the cow sounds, bang, excited response. I knew exactly at that point that I was dealing with the satellite bull. And so basically we got set up, and it was funny because there was two down logs that formed this perfect chase. In fact, I actually sat down, put my feet up on the stump, and I was leaning back just like this. And I focused on cow sounds and, just mews and regathering mews and pleading mews. And, this dude came in on a string, and he came to 20 yards, and Bryce zipped him. And it was funny. At one point, I'm back there calling, and Bryce looks back at me, and he sees me lounging, and he's like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, calling elk. What are you doing? And it was funny because after he zipped that bull and the bull runs off and we get back together, he asked me, he goes, all you did was focus on cow sounds. Why didn't you ever bugle? And I was like, did you not pay attention to how that bull was responding? And he's like, no, I was running to get my bow and then running to catch up with you. So he didn't really have a chance to gather it or hear how the bull was responding. But that's one of those things, because most people, as soon as they hear a bugle, they're immediately into that offensive, aggressive, bugle, 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 bugle. I want to bugle this bull in. Well, with that bull right there, if I had not adjusted my calling, we would have never called that bull in. So yes, in chapter 5, we talked about the breeding sequence. But we also did talk about adjusting that based on the responses that you're getting back from the bull. So basically what you're doing is you're taking that bull's temperature, figuring out what you're dealing with, and then you're adjusting that breeding sequence based on the responses. If it's a younger age class bull, you're typically going to adjust it to where you focus more heavily on the cow sounds. And vice versa. If it's a older age class bull, more mature, then you're going to focus and add in more bull sounds. So basically, younger bull, major cow sounds, just a little bit of support with bull sounds. Mature age class bull, you're going to focus more on the bull sounds with the cow sounds as support. So remember I said we usually use our cow sounds to set up our bugles. So, Derek, when doing the breeding sequence, should the caller worry about making noise walking around? No, not at all. Because typically in most setups, that caller is a good 50, 75 yards behind the shooter, because I know I really haven't got into the setup video with you guys yet. I want to do that out in the woods so you can see what I'm looking at. But in my setups, I will set up the shooter first, and then I will turn around and look to where I'm going to call from. And I'm going to go to the last part that I can see and then go an additional 20 yards or so past that. Because elk can see through the forest a lot better than we can. So by turning around and seeing how far I can see, I'm guessing how far that bull can see. Because remember, they're only going to come up to that point where they think they should be able to see that elk that's making the noise. Okay? Well, if you go back far enough and then add that additional 20 yards, you're back there far enough that that bull is going to have to walk by your shooter in order to get that visual of the elk that's making that sound, that that's making the sounds. So the fact that I'm that far back, no. And really, because I'm back there raking, glunking, snapping sticks. So while you're moving, yeah, you want to make a little bit of noise. It just adds realism, because remember, you're not just sitting in one place, Derek, doing the breeding sequence. We're actually moving around. So the fact that we're moving around, well, elk make noise when they move around. Why can't we? So, Chad made it. I hope I haven't missed much. No, Chad, actually, we were just getting ready to wrap up, so you made it just in time. I'm just joking. So no, we're just barely getting going and getting into things. So, okay. So does that kind of answer the question about tailoring and adjusting that? So Kelly, I need to practice more. Kelly, you will do fine. Don't worry. Don't stress about it. So, okay. So I can't stress enough about the importance of recognizing responses. So if it is a smaller, younger age class bull, the type of responses notice how all of them are kind of timid. There's not a lot of depth. There's not a lot of volume. Reason being is by the time we're really out there in September, these guys have already gotten their butt whooped, a few times. So they are already kind of timid. Now, if you start getting responses, that have more of that volume, that have more of that expansion, okay, that's automatically going to tell you that you're dealing with a little older bull. And the thing that I say, younger age class, your spikes, your 1x2s, 3 points, 3x4s, those odd spindly raghorn bulls. Once you kind of start getting into that 5 point and above, those are the ones that are typically going to respond with more enthusiasm, more aggression. So, because typically those guys are starting to get right on that breeding age, and they want a part of the action. So, Derek, that's what I thought. My brother-in-law couldn't make it and wanted me to ask. Oh no, not a problem. Not a problem. That's what this is for, is to get all these questions out. And I do have trips planned for a lot more videos here in the next couple of weeks, and be able to do a lot of these things that I want to do out in the trees. So, and then also, just so you guys know, we are sitting at 69 patrons right now. We only need 6 more. As soon as we get those next 6 and we hit the 75 mark, I'm going to pluck one of you guys, your name out of a hat, and one of you guys are going to be getting a dozen arrows from DCA Custom. Kyle, you guys will be basically working with him directly, and you can choose. He's going to give you options and you can choose. Just know that I'm going to pay up to $250 towards that dozen arrows for you guys. So, all right. What other questions do we have? So I thought let me do this too, because I know there was a couple of other comments that came up. So we'll just hit a couple of these other while we're waiting for any other questions. Let's see. So, Chad, the Blue Mountains of Oregon, debating on heading over that way or staying on the coast. Um, so Chad, the Blue Mountains in Oregon is actually where I started my elk hunting career. So I grew up in Hermiston, went to college in La Grande, hunted the Blue Mountains around La Grande right there. Spring Creek, Poverty Flats. I mean, pretty much as soon as you get up on top outside of Pendleton, all the way past La Grande, outside Union, up Mount Emily, hunted all those. The Blue Mountains over on the eastern part of Oregon are incredible country. It's not as thick as what you experience on the coast. Your shot windows are a lot more open. You can actually hear a lot better. Your calls carry a lot better. But also, too, because of that more openness, they can actually see you from farther away. It's really just personal preference. If you haven't hunted the east part, I say go east, young man. Go check it out, because that way, you can experience, the Blue Mountains with the Rocky Mountain elk versus staying on the coast with the Roosevelts, and just kind of see the different terrain, get a little different experience. And so I would say, if you have the opportunity, go for it. So, all right, a couple of other questions popped in. So even low sounds they can hear from a long distance. Yeah, Kelly, the thing with those low audibles is, remember, elk can hear a lot better than we can. So, what we think, or what we can hear at only 50 or 60 yards, they're hearing at 150 or 200. And really a lot more so is with some of those lower audible sounds, those grunts, the glunks, the raking, that kind of stuff. Typically those are things that they may not hear until they get to a certain point, and then all of a sudden they're coming in out of curiosity. So they're 300-400 yards out, they're coming in. Once they get to a point, then they start hearing these other audible sounds, and now all of a sudden they're putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. In fact, Kelly, when you're shooting next weekend with Eric, ask him about Angry Bull. So Angry Bull, that was the first bull. So, Eric and I, Eric hunted, just joined our camp last year, and he and I have talked elk hunting quite a bit. He's been pretty successful, but we've talked about my approach. And that morning with Angry Bull was the first time that he got to see firsthand this approach. And he was pretty blown away when I pulled this bull from about 1,200 yards out. So, and I mean on a string. So, but yeah, Kelly, just ask Eric and Chris to tell you about Angry Bull. So, let's see. Okay. Derek, this year the full moon is on September 13th, this year being our first year elk hunting. We were planning on coming out the 12th through the 22nd to catch the end of the pre-rut, beginning of peak rut, but this being our first time elk hunting, should we come out at a different time to have an easier time finding elk and figuring them out with maybe more daytime activity? So, Derek, no. Because honestly, the time that you're coming out with that full moon, their nighttime activity is going to be elevated, which is actually, with your first time with that nighttime activity being increased, it's actually going to make it easier for you to locate elk at night doing the night bugling that we talk about. So then basically by locating at night, because they are more active, and especially since it is a full moon, you could get started their direction earlier because you know where they're at. You're listening to them. You're making your way. The fact with the full moon, you can actually see, you can walk a little bit better so you can get closer to them so that as soon as it gets daylight, you're right close and within striking distance to set up and work that bull. Now, yes, it's true because of the bright moon, the full moon, they will go to bed earlier in the morning. But the only thing is because they're going to bed earlier, it means they are going to get up during the middle of the day. So you also have increased midday activity. See, this is one of the things with full moon that so many people will go, oh, it's a full moon. We only have an hour to hunt in the morning and an hour to hunt in the evening, and the rest of the day is a waste of time. So we just go back to camp and drink beer and play cards. Perfect. Go for it, because I'm going to stay out there at those times because I know exactly what happens during midday, and I've killed a lot of midday bulls. Full moon is a great time to hunt because, one, they are a lot more active at night, which makes them easier to find for night bugling. And that's one of the things that leads to a lot of our success is that night bugling and locating. So we are constantly going into area where there are elk every day. Two, that midday activity, because we have followed them and worked them until they went to bed. Now, we don't follow them into the bedding area. We follow them near, and then we set up. And then as soon as that midday time rolls around, we're doing some sort of, normally we do that cow routine that I talked about in chapter 5. And normally a bull will fire off. He's acknowledging that he heard us. Then boom, we move in, set up, work that bull. If we don't get a shot opportunity on him, we don't press the issue, we back out because, again, we know we're close enough that on that evening time when they get up and start moving towards their feeding area, yes, it's going to be a little bit later, but we're right there. The reason so many people think full moon hunting is a waste of time is because they don't get their lazy asses up out of bed. And so they take their normal time when they're leaving camp, and by the time they get to, they're hearing elk bugle in the distance, and by the time they get there, the elk have shut up. And they're like, see, it's a waste. Well, no, you got too late of a start. And then they just throw their hands up in the air. It's too late. Let's just go back to camp and we'll try to do something in the evening. So they go back to camp. They're sitting in camp during the midday with all that midday activity. And then in the evening, when they start again heading in, again, they're late because they're only going to move the last hour. So they're late again. So by the time they get back to where the elk are again and the activity starts, it's already too dark. So that's why a lot of people think that full moon is not a good time to hunt. So Derek, no. Stay with your schedule. Come out when you are planning on coming out. So, okay, we had a couple more. Ooh, that one must have struck a chord because we've got all kinds of things rolling in. So, he's told me the story like 40 times. Love it. Okay, good, Kelly. So you don't need to ask him. So, Mike Strong. Last year midday, we had a bull across a deep draw or small canyon with a creek in the bottom that we could see. He was lying in the shade of a big pine tree with several cows around him. When we would cow call at him, he would respond but wouldn't get up. With bugles, he would respond still less frequently, but the same reaction of not getting up or moving. He was surrounded by cows, so we didn't think we could sneak closer to him without getting busted. The draw was steep, thick, and brush and deadfall, and would not have been quiet trip to make. Any suggestions on a tactic for this situation? Yes. First off, on that bull, what he was doing is basically he was responding. He was acknowledging your cow sounds by basically saying, I hear you, I'm right here if you want to come over. Yes, he would respond to the bugles a lot less frequently because he is sitting in there with his cows and he doesn't have another bull around. And really, kind of what he's doing is he's telling his cows to stay put, and he's kind of, acknowledging your bugle and saying, yeah, I acknowledge you, but I really don't want you over here. So, with a bull like that, the last thing you want to do is drop down into the draw and go up on his side, because you're automatically in a lose-lose situation there because of thermals. Makes it sound like kind of midday, so thermals are blowing up. As soon as you drop down, your thermals are okay until you cross the bottom and start going up his side. Then your thermals are going to be going up. Me personally, depending on, since it's midday and I know I have a lot of time left, as long as that bull does not get bumped, he's going to stay right there. So I am going to work a horseshoe and come in above him. So I'm going to stay on my side and I'm going to work deeper up into the draw and then curl over onto his side and then come down. Now I'm going to stay in a point to where I'm above him because I want thermals blowing from him to me. At that point, I'm going to set up and I'm just going to do a few soft cow calls. 2 or 3 soft cow calls, wait 5 minutes, 2 or 3 soft cow calls. I'm not going to go attack him while he's bedded down. Because if you go attack him when he's bedded down and you push him out, he's out of that area. He's not going to come back. But if you stay off a distance a little bit and, do those 2 or 3 or 4 soft cow calls, and what I mean, that's all you're doing. Nothing fancy. That is a midday communication. You're going to pique his curiosity, and he probably will, bugle and respond to you. And again, he's just acknowledging that he heard you and basically saying, I'm right here. Now, as it starts getting later in the day and more towards evening, or depending on that, really the midday time, if he hasn't gotten up already, he will get up, kind of feed around because his stomach's empty. At that point, he will give you a different bugle. And you will know when he's on his feet. Because I assume that the one he's doing when he's laying down is just kind of a bedding bugle. Something along those lines. Where it's just kind of a half-hearted, he's just kind of broadcasting his position to you. And he's just like, I'm right here. If you want to come over, come over. If you don't, whatever. But by you circling around and now you've cut that distance and now you're on his side, doing those cow calls, as soon as he gets on his feet, do you hear the difference? He now all of a sudden is kind of announcing with more intent. So now basically, or what he may do is he may get up and give you that soft bark into that bugle with 2 or 3 chuckles, okay? That is what's called a roundup bugle. And what he's doing is he's now calling you to him. He's saying, okay, I hear you, I acknowledge you, come on over. You stay put. Keep going with those 2 or 3 cow calls. Now, if he goes quiet, do it for about another 15, 20 minutes. Be looking. He could be sneaking in on you. After those 15, 20 minutes, if nothing, just go silent then. And wait until the evening time. Because then the evening time, when they get up on their feet to move to their feeding area, the bugle is going to increase because his cows are now all of a sudden on their feet and moving, and he's going to be then moving with the cows. Then that's when you're going to get the wind set, you're going to get into position, and you're going to break into that breeding sequence. So, okay, Mike, does that make sense? So that's how I would go after that situation. So, Derek, sweet, thanks. I have read good things about midday activity during full moon. Absolutely. I love it. So, because there are a lot less people out there. So, Chad, how would you approach a ridge system that has several finger ridges running off it that have northeast facing slopes for potential bedding areas? Breeding sequence nearby each location. So, assuming there's no confirmed elk in those areas. Okay, so Chad, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically move through that area, locating. I'm going to have my spots where I do the locate routine, but I'm also going to be reading the sign that I'm seeing. What type of elk sign am I seeing? Am I seeing a lot of fresh sign? Am I seeing a lot of old sign? That's really the information that's going to tell me whether I want to set up and spend some time in that area or if I just want to breeze through that area. Because if I'm seeing nothing but old sign, then there's nothing really that's telling me that I want to stay here unless I get a bull to respond to one of my location bugles. Then at that point, okay, game on, bull located, let's move in and go to work. So that's the thing. Any area that you're hunting, your first thing that you're doing is you're moving through locating, but you're also reading the sign of what you're seeing. Tracks, droppings, rubs, beds. You're gathering all that information because that's really what's going to tell you whether there's elk in the area or not. I mean, yes, a bull bugling back at you, that is a definite indication that there's elk in the area. But if you're not hearing anything, if nothing's answering, or they're doing low audible tones, but they're too far away for you to hear those low audible tones, the sign is one thing that's definitely going to let you know that there's elk in the area. So I would basically move through locating, get a response, move and work, or if I see fresh sign. If I see really fresh sign and no response, yeah, I'm going to set up there and I'm going to start breaking into that blind sequence, breeding sequence approach. So, Mike Strong, yes, thank you. Makes total sense. Wish I had found all this last summer. He was a good bull too. Get back after him this year if you have the opportunity. So, okay. Let's check and see if we got any more. Nothing on the Patreon. Chad, would you run off the top of the ridge or down off the side? So, it almost makes it sound like, so Chad, I'm assuming you have a main ridge that's running north-south, and then you have these east-west fingers that are coming off it that's creating that north and northeastern facing slope. I'm not necessarily going to bail off. Again, it depends on what the sign is telling me, what the time of the day, what the thermals are doing. But I'm basically going to work that main ridge, and I'm going to work back and forth from side to side so that I can call off into both sides. I mean, ideally, those types of that north-south with the fingers can be tricky because you're up on top, and especially in mornings and evenings with thermals blowing down, it's pretty rough. That's why, my motto is usually hunt up, pack down. Now, there are times where, I will camp or start up on a ridge, but I know there's a specific area that I'm wanting to get to, and I will actually drop off the top of the ridge on that side that I want to get to, drop down low enough, and then swoop up underneath. So it's always planning your approaches and always planning your movements based on what the thermals are doing. You always want to keep the thermals in your favor. And on those times when the elk just aren't vocal or bugling a bunch, it's tough because you don't know exactly where they are. That's why the night bugling is so effective, because you already know where they're feeding. You know where their starting point is. And then you can adjust your path so that you come under that feeding area and start following them, or paralleling them to their bedding area. So Derek, last night someone mentioned the EZV bow sight and you said you had one. Looked it up last night, was wondering your thoughts on it. So Derek, the principle behind it I think is good. And yeah, I've done a lot of research on it. I've watched a lot of videos. I haven't had an opportunity yet to put it on my bow. I do have it here with several of the inserts. That is something that I'm planning to do within the next couple of weeks, is to put that on the bow, get it dialed in, and do a whole video on it and play with it. So for right now, let's table that, Derek, and let me play with it a little bit before I really give some feedback. The one thing I can say, as far as construction on it with materials and how it's put together, it's a very solid, well-built sight. Um, the other thing that I like about it is you don't have a lot of moving parts. You don't have to worry about a branch getting in your sight and bending your pin over, which I have had happen to me. And when you shoot a single pin and that happens, it gets a little tough. In fact, that was a couple of years ago that that happened. We had gone through some really really thick brush, and we got a bull located and set up, and I knocked an arrow and looked down, and my pin was like this, and so here I am gingerly trying to bend this thing back up and not snap it off, and hope that I could get it bent up and close enough before that bull came in. Was pretty lucky. The bull did come in, but he came in to 8 yards, so didn't really matter that the pin wasn't perfect. But yeah, so that is one thing that I like about that EZV. So, but yeah, let me play with it a little bit more. So, Mike, let's say you have a typical bedding area peg that is about 2 miles off a road as a crow flies, nearly 4 miles as a hike. Could it be a good idea to pack back in and then set up a camp? You certainly could do that. So, that's one of the things where, I've mentioned that I do have things in my pack that I always have the ability to stay at least one night on the mountainside. So, but definitely if you're going to go in there, and so if it's a 4 mile hike, you're going to want to go about 2 miles. You're going to want to cut that distance in half, because 2 miles in a morning really isn't that bad to cover. And definitely make sure that you are downwind, um, from where they're going. So that's the bedding area. The other piece of the puzzle that you're going to have to figure out is where they're feeding and what their travel corridor is. So before you pack in and set up camp, figure out their feeding area first and their travel corridor. Because once you have their feeding and travel corridor and bedding figured out, then you know where to place your camp that's not going to affect them. Because the thing is you may go in 2 miles, set up camp, but that could be where they're going to feed. And now all of a sudden they're feeding right where you're camping, and because of your camp odor and your smell, it could kind of push them out. So thanks for sharing and coaching. Good job, Michael. I'll catch you later. Phone is dying. Not a problem, Kelly. Have a great night, bud. So okay, and then wait for thermals to switch before working in. Well, the thing is with the bedding, I mean, the whole purpose of getting in there, and the whole purpose is for you to get on them faster in the morning. And it's you're not necessarily focusing on getting on them in that bedding area, Mike. You want to get on them in that transition period from feeding to bedding. That's where you're going to have a much better opportunity of calling a bull in. So If you wait until you hit them at that bedding area, you've missed a lot of prime time and prime opportunities in the morning to get them when they're coming off feeding and they're in that travel corridor. So that's why I always want to know where they feed, where they bed, how they go from feed to bed, and how they go from bed to feed. Because those are all information that I want to know, because I'm going to adjust and calculate my morning hunt and my evening hunt based on those movements. So, all right, Derek, if it works like they say with being able to pretty much range them, which seems like it would work great for elk hunting, not knowing exactly where, what route they will bring in. Chris, I have an EZV and have had success with it on targets. I didn't hunt with it last fall due to confidence, but we'll sure try it this year for whitetail. Not enough confidence to elk hunt with it yet. So here's the thing with that sight, and this kind of goes in with what I was saying last night when we were talking about the target panic deal. So if you're planning to use the EZV, you don't want to practice with it on a normal target face, okay? Because the whole deal with the EZV is, basically boxing in the vital areas. So that's where you're going to want to spend $5 and get one of those elk silhouette paper targets so that you're used to the mental picture of framing that V on the vitals, the front shoulder and the back of the vitals, and knowing how to really box that. While you're training with this, you definitely want to use a rangefinder at known distances while you're training your brain for that sight picture. Because I think that's where a lot of people struggle with a sight like the EZV, is they practice on just a square block with dots or a big NFAA circle, that's what they practice with, and they're drilling that middle dot, middle dot, middle dot, middle dot. Well, in their brain, all they have trained is framing that circle. They have not taught their brain on the sight picture of framing the vitals, okay? So that's where getting that elk silhouette or a deer silhouette, whatever you're planning to hunt with that sight, and work on that mental framing at those known distances. Then once you have those known distances with the rangefinder, you've trained with it for a while, you've trained your brain on the sight picture, then you can kind of now start doing the reverse practice, to where now you just start moving around, you pick a spot, you frame the vitals with that and go, oh, okay, I think that's 36 yards. Then you pull your rangefinder out, 36 yards. Okay, yeah, we got it. Then execute the shot. Do that for a little while. Then leave your rangefinder inside, because you've trained your brain on the sight picture of framing those vitals. You've learned what all those different framing of the vital sight pictures look like at 20 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, all the way out to 60. And that's what's going to gain you the confidence in that sight. So then, as soon as you are out there hunting, your brain's going to recognize, as soon as you draw back and you frame those vitals, your brain's going to automatically recognize, you know what, we have spent all summer on this paper target framing this. This is exactly, that bull is 26 yards, boom, execute, done. So the key with all of this is all of that training and all of that mental preparation and getting your mind used to the sight picture, okay? So now the one thing too is, Derek, I know the EZV comes with a sight-in target that basically is a vital silhouette, just a vital that has basically notches on it, or white triangles, and that's where you put those tick marks on the EZV. So that's to start getting that mental picture. But then for training wise, yeah, you do want to get something with a silhouette, and you could either, like I said, do the paper target or the solo target. Both work really, really well for that. So, okay. What other questions do you guys have in regards to kind of the breeding sequence and those couple of videos? We've only got about 10 minutes left. So last round for questions. Let me see. Did I miss anything? Oh, Jack, what's the orange color on your tube? Just part of it. So, okay. This is actually the acrylic mouthpiece from Native by Carlton, and this is the reason you really can't see much here is this is a prototype tube that we are working on. So the basic theory with this acrylic mouthpiece that Native by Carlton is doing is it's based off of a trumpet trombone mouthpiece that is really shaped and designed to help you putter your lips when you're doing, your lip ball. So that's the whole purpose of this design. But basically that's what that mouthpiece is, Jack. So and then the rest of the tube is kind of a prototype that we are working on. So are you saying that you like the sound of that tube? So I haven't even heard it outside yet. So I don't know how well it sounds out there, but I'm kind of anxious to find out. So okay, did we miss anything else? Nothing on the Patreon page. Okay, Chris, fantastic explanation is exactly what you have to do to make it successful. With practice, you will begin to recall the yardages for your marks. Yeah, it's all that mental training. So, and like I said, if all you do is train with that on circles, you have not really taught your mental how to frame the vitals, what that sight picture is really going to look like. And that's the critical thing there. Derek, yes, sounds good. So, yeah, I'm liking the sounds that it's producing inside. I'm really excited to see what it sounds like outside. So, Mike, is it typical for a bull to bed down 100 yards from his cows? I worked on a bull that I had responding last year down a ridge line and jumped his cows way earlier than expected. Seemed odd to me. No, because the thing you got to understand is when elk bed down, they're not in this tight group. They actually are spread out a little bit. And honestly, the bull is usually going to bed down on the upwind side of those cows. So if thermals are blowing up, he's going to bed down above them. That's why whenever they're moving, remember, elk always move with the wind in their nose. That's why typically the bull is at the last or back of the group, because what he's doing with that wind blowing, he's in essence scent checking every single cow that's walking in front of him. Well, when they're bedded down, he's typically on the upwind side, so that as that wind's blowing, it's blowing those cow scents to him. So he's constantly scent checking those cows while he's bedded there. So yeah, that's pretty normal for him to be separated from his cows, because he wants to be far enough away that he kind of gathers the wind from all of them. So if he's too close, he's only going to catch the scent of a couple, but as he backs off, he catches more scent of the whole entire group. So, Mr. Jack. So, okay. Sounded good to me. Okay. Mr. Lars, this may be a big question, but situations do you use barks, glunks, and different kinds of bugles in? What are the more aggressive kind and what are the less aggressive sounds? So as far as the barks go, I never bark first. So I always wait for that elk to bark first, and then I will bark back and respond. Glunks, I mean, Chapter 5, we talk about using glunks within the breeding sequence. And, different kinds of bugles, we actually talk about that too. So as a bull gets more aggressive, his bugles get shorter, higher pitched, more volume, and they fall off a lot sharper at the end of the bugle. So as that aggression level rises, and you'll know it. You'll start hearing, because it's gonna all of a sudden gonna have more volume, more higher pitch. It's gonna drop off a lot faster into a heavier growl. Um, but those are dead giveaways of, more aggressive sounds, just like on raking. So, it can just be basically sitting there rubbing casually on it, but then all of a sudden you'll hear crack, da 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 da, da da da. Definitely more aggressive with slapping those antlers on the tree or on the stick or thrashing that bush. It will definitely have a way more aggressive sound to it. And those are all things that, in chapter 5 in the instructional part 1 and part 2 that talked about that as you're hearing that more aggressive responses from the bull, you start increasing your aggressive responses. So as his aggression levels rising, your aggression levels rising, and you're basically kind of, matching that. So it'll make a lot more sense that, once I actually film while I'm out there doing. Glunks are more of an excited sound tied to breeding. It's not an excited sound. A glunk is a bull. He has scent receptors on the roof of his mouth. What he's doing is that glunk is he's grabbing air, glum, glum, and he's pushing that to those scent receptors. He's scent checking the air. That's what a glunk is. A glunk is a bull scent checking the air to verify that whether that cow is in estrus or not. That's why glunks are important to the breeding sequence. It adds realism to the breeding sequence. So if you're not doing any part, so this is one thing where I talk about you have to make sure that the sounds you are doing correlates to the picture that you are trying to paint. So I have heard people out there that will all of a sudden grab their tube and start popping on it, but they have not portrayed anything that there is a hot cow or anything that there is a breeding sequence going on. So it does not fit. So that's adding that realism and making sure that the sounds you are doing ties in with the story that you're trying to tell, that picture that you're trying to paint. So, Lars, does that make sense? So, all right, guys, we got about 3 minutes. Double check the Patreon page. So, and yeah, like I said, one of the videos I have coming up is me actually out doing the breeding sequence and having one or two of my hunting partners act like bulls, and I'm gonna interact with them, and based on the responses they give me, you're going to see me tailor what I'm doing and adjust what I'm doing based on the responses I'm getting back from them. And so that will make a lot more sense, because you'll actually be able to see all this kind of in working. And honestly, I've got a couple of external terabytes with a lot of footage that I really need to go through. The only tricky thing with some of that footage is some of it I can't use because of the TV show and the DVD series that footage was filmed for, but I'll see what I can find. But definitely I can do a lot of reenactments. So, all right, guys, I think we are going to wrap this up for this week. Just so you guys know, next week I'm going to take the week off from Wapiti Wednesday Q&A. I'm not going to be available to do Wednesday nights, Wapiti Wednesday live Q&A, so I will make an announcement, but just thought I would let you guys know. And then as far as Patreon, we will be back in 2 weeks. Next week, I'll post up again the question to see what kind of topics you guys want to cover. So, all right, guys, appreciate all of you guys tuning in tonight. Appreciate all of your support. Thank you so much for being patrons. It really means a lot to me. As always, keep calling, keep practicing. Most importantly, though, have fun. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks on the next Patreon live Q&A. Have a great night, everybody.